So we're good to roll.
Should I turn my echo up to say live? Live.
How's that? That good?
That's the new intro of going live.
Yeah.
Live.
Talk live.
That's good. All right. Welcome to Tabletop Talk, your premier host of professional dungeoneering, dungeon mastering, and tabletop RPG play done by a bunch of amateurs. I am your host, Jeremy.
And Kyle.
And here today we have our standard guests, Rick and Trevin.
Hello. As well as Christopher over on...
Today's producer.
Yeah, Christopher, today's producer, tomorrow's producer, forever producer.
Yeah.
Now, how's everyone doing today?
I was doing great until your professional comment just absolutely sent me and killed me. So I'm doing wonderful.
Good.
I'm doing good. Doing a lot better now that I'm here. Excited.
I guess I'll take the, I'm good. We're talking about RPGs and games with buddies. I couldn't be any better.
That's good. I honestly feel the same way. Every single time we're here, it's like, how are you, Jeremy? And I'm like, I'm great. I'm here talking about games. Why would I not be happy?
Oh, I know you weren't able to, since you gave the intro this time, I thought I'd say it for you.
Yeah, thank you. I still said it anyway.
You did.
Because why not? Anyway, so today we're going to be talking about problem players. And here's the great thing. We are the problem players.
I was going to say, why did you look heavily at Rick when you said problem players?
Okay, well, here's the deal. I think, when you're trying to avoid the problem and you look somewhere else. So Rick is the furthest away from someone else in this room. You can either choose.
I'm on the opposite side of the table.
I was going to say that Jeremy and I work together, so we spend too much time together, and that's probably
we do know we're problematic. Okay, so the first question, it's what are your two biggest flaws as a player? Why are they problematic, and what are you doing to fix them? Because it's one thing to just say that you have a problem and not fix it, which would be annoying to your DM, but how are you addressing your problems? And we'll just go one at a time, one problem, and then we'll circle back. Who wants to start? Who's feeling problematic? Rick.
I would think my biggest one is I don't like being like a one-trick pony, or I don't like being pigeonholed as a character to like one thing, but that's like the whole point of D&D is each character brings one thing to the table to create the whole party. And I have this like deep desire to be like the everyman of like, I want to be able to do a little bit of everything, kind of like how I am in real life.
So is it almost like a main character syndrome sort of deal? Like,
absolutely
not necessarily in like you want it to be only about you, but you want to fill all the roles, even though the idea is
with 100% certainty, I will say that I suffer from main character syndrome.
Okay, perfect.
But so I like, as I build a character, it's like, oh, I'm going to be this class, like a druid, but also I want to be able to do this and do that and do this and do this and be needed for that. It's like, no, I constantly have to remind myself, you are filling this purpose. Other people get to do that.
Yeah, it makes me think of basically playing, three lanes. You got three lanes. Everybody's running down them. Why am I blanking on the game? League of Legends.
Yes.
Thank you to nobody.
All I was thinking was driving. I'm like, yeah, you got the fast lane, you've got the middle lane, and then you've got my lane.
Where I was going with it is it's essentially like that. Everyone's got a job to do in League of Legends, and it's like being that guy who decides, I'm going to be top lane. And then instead they're all of a sudden in the middle, the bottom, and in the jungle. And you're just like, what is going on?
That's that's why I like playing the jungle role in MOBAs, because you get to do a bunch of cool stuff. And then just, oh, hey, something's happening. Boom, go there and then go back to the jungle.
Yeah.
I hate being pigeonholed. So that is probably my biggest one, even though it's a fundamental piece. of D&D is
Yeah.
filling your role and being inside that role.
So, so then how are you planning on addressing it?
I don't.
This is coming. For those of you I don't know, which is probably everyone, I'm DMing a one shot very soon, and this will be my first interaction DMing for Rick, and so this is great. This is wonderful.
I very, very resistantly will I try and work on this, and it's going to be a long road. So ultimately, what
I might be able to help you on that. I used to have the same problem.
Probably what I'll do is just make all the other stats that aren't focused on like the character's role really bad, so that if I try to do some other stuff, they'll just fail.
I'm just gonna take away Rick's character sheet and just give him. It's just gonna be like one line with one action.
Yes.
He could be Toby.
Okay, all right. Who's next?
I'll go. I would say mine is sometimes not sort of shutting down on the narrative side if no one else is doing it. Like no one else is doing the quote unquote the fluff. Like saying what they're doing, I'll start to treat it just like a video game. Like, oh, I got to roll this to get certain damage. When that's actually my least favorite part of it. But if no one else is doing it, I don't want to be. Oh, there's Trevin taking 5 minutes to talk about the spell he's casting, and so that kind of fear.
I get you on that. That it's tough when you really want to do the role play part and you're the only one. I don't blame you on that.
Yeah,
it's easy to just drop it if you feel like
exactly
you're the only one doing it.
Yeah.
Luckily, this kind of group is filled with idiots who like to hear themselves talk.
Yeah.
So
educated idiots.
Yes.
That's Dr. RPG for you.
Yeah. So going to the second part of that question, how would you address that in the future if that kind of thing happened again for like your enjoyment and the enjoyment of your DM and your other players?
I think kind of to be determined. Like kind of, I just need more experience, more time. Like yeah, I've only been in really 2 campaigns and part of them, so I just haven't had enough experience. But part of it after like meeting you guys is kind of not being afraid to, not being like, oh, everyone's gonna get annoyed, but the knowing, like okay, kind of reading the room.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of going for it just to go for it. Like, no, I'm not afraid to do this because I'm confident that it's cool and it's fun,
Yeah.
And certainly the DM or other players will tell me if it's not.
Yeah.
Like that's always the toughest part is you don't want to do something. And when you're saying no for like other people, when you're like, I don't want to put them out, I don't want to do this, and you're not even giving them the chance to like accept it.
Yeah. Well, I like to, in that situation for me, I found me and Jeremy, we were kind of running into that issue right before we had you join that first campaign you entered as Callahan. We actually talked to the group and said, hey, we would like to push this a little more role play and all, because right now it kind of feels like only me and Jeremy are currently like describing what we're doing. And is everyone else down for that? Or you guys just want to continue just brawling stuff out? It made a little bit of a difference, I felt, in the group, but I think communication ahead of time is a good thing on that.
Yeah, I like that. All right, Kyle, and what's one of your problems?
For me, so this comes with actually being a forever DM usually. I have an issue of sometimes overstepping the DM or talking over them, not in a way that's like condescending and not trying to correct them, but I'll sometimes almost start to narrate my own thing and then ask certain questions that it's more of a just out of experience. And I'm trying my best now to just quietly let the DM handle it. Cause I feel you said like that it's what are 2 problems and both of mine kind of correlate together is doing that. And then, like a huge trigger button for me is when if Jeremy's DMing and he gives a quick spiel or good enough spiel on like what our setup is for the camp, and then Rick decides he didn't listen to any of it and is now coming up with all these extra ideas that it's like, no, he said we literally could just walk in. Why do we need this excess stuff? I sometimes end up accidentally standing up for the DM when I should just let the DM take care of the
Gosh.
problem. And I think, again, it's just as a forever DM and usually a leader in the group, like someone willing to step out and say something, it gets hard for me to hold back sometimes.
I don't see this ever being a thing within our group here. I don't see you and Jeremy ever coming to a head at all. Like, I think it's
Not at all.
No, yeah, because Kyle and me operate in a hive mind. And being that we're always really loud, crazy, chaotic, and there's lots of stingers.
What are you gonna do tonight, brain? Take over the world, Binky. Take over the world.
Yeah, sometimes Kyle's more set on stinging people and I'm more set on making honey. And then vice versa sometimes too, where I'm super vindictive and Kyle's like, no, but remember the flowers, like we gotta go
We
there.
gotta pollinate, man. We gotta pollinate.
All right, I'll go ahead now. This is one of my biggest ones is not taking notes. A lot of times I love to sit and just be at the table. And so taking notes seems like a chore and it's something that I don't want to do. And a lot of times when I'm taking notes, this is from someone like coming from like I have a history degree. And so there was constant note taking of crazy notes and bullets and all of this stuff and referencing. So I did all of that in school and then I'm playing this and I'm like, well, I don't want to take notes. And I feel like sometimes when you like take a note, you miss something. But taking notes is super important because come the next session, there'd be all of this stuff that I might remember the gist of something, but I miss a key point. I miss, the name of someone. And so I'm like asking the DM, hey, what's the bad guy's name that we're searching for again?
I want to point out though, you don't even have to answer your how do you plan on solving it. You did. You started playing with me because I take too many notes.
Well, yes, but the way I've been trying to do it is I've been trying to take quicker notes, just instead of it being like big sentences, just some keywords that I'll remember for later. But then I'm also trying to work on a personal journal that would be more fun. That I was trying to think of what would spark enjoyment for myself, and that includes quotes. I love being able to reference back on what someone did or said in a game. Like, oh, well, Kyle's character said this, right? And so in the future, when I'm taking notes, I'm going to look for things like, hey, what was something cool that happened in battle? What's something fun that was said? Because I will be more engaged with my own note taking if I do something like that. Now, this is something that I have no idea if it will make me take more notes or not, but I'd like to experiment with it.
Yeah. Otherwise, you just fall back on my like whole written out stories on Discord that are just unnecessarily detailed.
Correct. Yeah. If I am playing with Kyle as a player or DM, could I use him as the cliff notes? Yes. But I have other people I play this game with.
I know. I know you do.
All right, yeah, so let's go around again if anyone has another problem. I've got loads, so, I can always fill them in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, like I said, just the first one was overstepping, and that's usually more so in the sense of, like, they start to describe a creature, and I just have a vast knowledge on mythology and, like, the monster manual and such, so description alone, I usually can tell you what it is right off the bat. So sometimes I accidentally reveal something. But the second one is more of, yeah, go for it.
No, I was going to say, you know way more than just the name. You'll be like rattling off stats to me.
That's not important. Again, that though goes back to the other episode we did on episode 3 when we talked about character builds. And that's why now I focus on like intelligence and wisdom is because I just naturally know most of these things. So it's better to make a seasoned character who might have ran into something or knows at least about it. No, for me, my other problem is when there are players who are just being rude or disrespectful to others and the DM. I don't like it when I'm a DM if somebody's talking over me and not about the game, but they're just being rude or they're telling people how to take their turn, how to play their game. And that bothers me to the point I jump in and almost hit like a white knight scenario where it's like, I just feel the need to step in and speak up for people, but that's not what they always need. And that's not my job when I'm not the DM. I feel like it's the DM's job to get. And so I'm trying to better myself in being quieter during sessions, which is hard because the only person who talks more than me is Jeremy.
And that is debatable depending on the day.
Depending on the day, yeah.
I would say mine is that early in campaigns, especially with like new parties, I tend to meta game quite a bit.
Okay.
Just because you're getting used to who you're playing with, and like that line of like, am I asking the character this question or am I asking the player this question? Because to me, both are extremely useful. And then as you get a little bit more used to the characters and stuff, you kind of branch away from that. But there are times when it's like, I need to know this. Like myself and my character want to know this. So we will like, hey, how are we on doing a little bit of like meta question right here? And then you go and then you move on. But,
yeah. And I think honestly, though, that's actually not really a problem. I think that's healthy, like beginning a game, especially if you don't know most of the players and you're new to the group, because I've had characters that have had like interesting personalities that are either a little sexist or make a comment that maybe would be uncomfortable and all. But then I have to like clarify, like, yo, it's just my Toydarian in the Star Wars campaign is gonna call you sweet cheeks and hey, love cake, hey, stuff like that. Not how I talk, but it sells the character.
Yes.
So I like to. I think there's not much of a problem with that, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah. On a brief side note, I think Chris can attest to this. That is the way that Kyle talks on weekends.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I was like, what?
The voice that Kyle's using on this podcast is different than his real voice.
That's his customer service voice.
Yeah, I think that's why we were having you host this time around and all. And yeah,
I like that. It's tough. There's a fine balance between metagaming and role playing. And how can you play this game without metagaming? And people are like, oh, you can't metagame. And I get it, because you're trying not to do things your character wouldn't know. But there's a certain level of metagaming that's important. I just don't like, sometimes it's the most difficult things to forget about metagaming is when you hear the DM tell like another player that they have like a cursed item, or the DM gives like them crucial information. And you're like, how can I get this information? I know that their item only does this when they do that. So how am I going to accidentally, in quotes, make that happen?
Well, it's not metagaming if you don't say any of that out loud.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not wrong.
And then for mine, I think it's awesome that you can do all this online now. But man, when I do it online, staying focused and listening, like there'll be times like every time I played, I had to be over at Kyle's. If I was left to my own devices, oh man, I'd be doing anything but paying attention. Which then I'm like, well, that's super rude. You know, the DM spends all this time, you're hosting it and doing everything. So that one's trouble for me, is staying focused when it's just by myself and I'm online.
Yeah, that's honestly my second one as well. And it's an online only, because when I'm in person, I'm locked in.
Yeah.
But when I'm online, sometimes, especially in combat, I'm so used to things where I'm like, I know what my next action is in combat. And if this happens, I'll do this. If that happens, I'll do this. But sometimes, like, especially like if you have a wizard in combat, there's so many different spells they can cast, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes when it gets to the wizard and they're in their mind and they're like, oh, wait, maybe I'll do this, but what about this? And then it's like a few minutes of just them thinking about it or doing it, or they say they want to cast this, but it differs from what the DM's definition of that spell will do.
Oh, that's always the hardest.
And then it's another 5 to 10 minutes of that, and I'm just staring at a screen of Roll20 where the map is not moving, everything, and I'm listening to two people argue. Those are the moments where I can start to tune out. And I like it in the past, like sometimes I'd be like, well, I'll just go on my phone during that time, or I'll go in this, but it's tough to pull yourself back from that when it does get to other turns. And so one of the things I've tried to do is to try to like make sure my screen is kind of locked in there. I'll whisper other players. If it's Roll20, I'll whisper them like different like ideas of stuff like, or hey, this or that or that. Or,
you and me do that a lot.
Yeah.
When we were like doing it from home. It was like always, you'd hear like, it'd be like our buddy and the DM arguing at the time, and then occasionally you'll hear Jeremy or me chuckle because we're sending jokes back and forth to each other.
Yeah, and that was helpful. So finding something that was going to keep me engaged, and that was it. In our campaign, it was sending jokes or just different things. And one of my other campaigns, it's sending just like, hey, check out this spell. Like for someone who's going after me in the initiative, I'm like, this is going to be fun. Like I'm going to do this, and they're like, well, you have that? I'm like, oh yes, I do.
Usually I'm the DM on that. And anytime it comes to you have that? Oh, yes, I do. I go, oh, fuck, I forgot you had that. And I'll like, this was meant to be a perfect trap for Trevin to figure out how to get out, but Jeremy has the answer. It was meant to be a specific Trevin trap.
Like, Trevin, don't worry, Trevin, I've got you. All right, so that brings us to this is my fun question of the day. What's a problematic or hilarious issue that you have that you don't intend on changing and will get roasted in the comments for, or roasted by us? You know, what's something that you are not intent on changing that is problematic, but not to you?
Well, Rick already answered main character syndrome.
That and so my like real one for that, I am awful at voices and accents. So my character will just sound like me. And any attempt at any type of accent or like other voice is going to just be absolute garbage.
I think that's though better than the opposite, when you make an accent for your character and then you drop it because you can't keep up with it.
Yeah.
Gosh, the amount of first session accents I've heard started and dropped has been real rough. Honestly, in one campaign that Kyle and I were in, for some reason, 3 out of the 5 of us players decided to do gruff voices that were really, really similar to each other. And all of us were like, well, I think this, but I think this. It was like a Batman video. It was so bad.
I'm Batman. It's more of a, just sits in my back.
So I think that's fine. I think that, Rick, having the same voice, whether we're playing in a modern time or medieval time or steampunk era or high fantasy, sure, why not?
I think the word dude is transcendent across all ages and times.
My rogue says, dope, 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 dope.
Man, that's whack. Total cap, bro.
Oh, man.
What about you, Trevin?
I would say is probably.
Sorry, that sounded like I just threw you to the wolves. Like, your turn. Get in the cave, Daniel.
But really, your turn, Trevin.
Yeah, immediately.
No, I was probably picking a character that isn't one that's good and kind of, like stays with the same archetype. I would have such a hard time playing like an evil character, and it's not something like I want to branch out and try different races and stuff. Which is, I don't know why that's probably because I'm new. I like staying with what I know, like an elf or a human, and so this is actually something I do want to change. But I would have a hard time playing like an evil character. Like, that'd be tough.
The mission was to steal candy from the baby. How did the baby get more candy? I felt bad, so I bought more candy for the baby. I gave it stuff. I gave it even a new toy. I don't know if it was age appropriate. I should go ask.
I actually have I had an idea for an evil campaign that I think you would really like them. Yeah. This is an idea I thought of last year. So the idea is that you'd have like 4 or 5 party members who are all evil, right?
Yeah.
And they somehow, in one of the villages they raided or whatnot, they bumped into this like 40-something-year-old dad whose kids are off in another area of the world, and he's just like really bored and he's looking for another purpose in his life. And so when they go to raid him, he's like, hey, I'm making a fresh brew. Why don't you guys have some? And they like adopt him into the party. And so he's just going along with him. He's like, you guys can keep
changing them for the more.
Yeah, he's like, yeah. So he's like, you guys can keep doing whatever you're doing. I just want to make sure you're fed. You know what I mean? And so there'd just be constant dad jokes, constant like.
It would be nice to have a home cooked meal instead of a stolen cold one.
So that's Peter from X-Force in Deadpool 2.
Yeah, exactly. So he would just be there, and then it would just be a very, very slow one, and then you'd get all these friction points where you're like, Well, should we tell him what we did, or should we just who's going to lie to him?
Well, I'm not telling Dad.
So anyway, that could be your evil party because there's an end game of being good.
Yeah, no, and that also kind of makes me think of Warhammer 40K. Everyone's evil, so that also makes it a lot easier. Like everyone sucks.
Everything is awful.
So, yeah.
It's a grim, dark future in 40K. Sorry. Mine is definitely though, killing off characters to play new characters, not other people's characters, but like I get so many ideas and I am a very limited amount of time. I get to be a player. So sometimes I will just get bored of a character I really enjoyed making and people are then baffled that I just go out of my way and do something blatant to just get rid of them so I could play a new character. Because they're like, didn't you write like an entire fantasy novel about this character? And I'm like, yeah, but have you read the new sequel that's about this character? And they're like, why put so much work into something you're just going to destroy?
Your character was just about to level up and you just jumped off a bridge? Well, yeah, because this another one has sparkles on his vest.
It's true. I'm telling you, this sparkle vest idea is going to be a killer.
Isn't a sparkle vest just like mithril?
I mean, I wasn't going to openly say it. It was going to be hinted at.
Miller.
All right, that brings me to me. Brings us to me. Brings me to me. Anyway,
it's about you, isn't it?
Well, I am the host.
You host duty one time.
He made me the host, and as you can see, I'm in my host position right now too at the table.
It's true. He's got like the one elbow on there, leaning forward, hat tilted back, and all.
As an audio medium, I think we should definitely lean in more towards the visual element.
I think so too. In our I was about to say our session 0. In our first podcast, our podcast 0 that may or may never be available. I referenced the shirt that Kyle was wearing and I was like, yeah, you guys can see clearly by the shirt Kyle's wearing. And then it hit me at that moment that this is a podcast.
Yeah. I kind of remember Rick making a comment like, I don't think you remember there's no cameras here. No.
Jeremy, there's not always cameras on you.
Yeah. I did a podcast with a friend for hockey for a season, and I started and ended every single podcast with waving.
You know what I realized?
I love that.
Not a single one of them ever made video, but I waved to
every time
the audience.
But Jeremy, what was
you? No.
To you that we totally blanked.
All good. So my biggest problem that I am not intent on changing, and I like vehemently think that it is important, is that my bedtime and my sleep is important. So when the game session is starting to go long, and I will say like, hey, I'm gonna dip in a half hour. And then when it gets there, sometimes even in the middle of combat, I go, here are the spells I'm still gonna use. You can do this, you can do that, but I've got to get to bed.
Yeah.
And that's what I'll do. And it's weird because a bunch of my, like in my family one, a bunch of them are night owls. So they could be up till like 10, 11, midnight, 1, 2. Like one time they're like, oh yeah, we were up till 2 a.m. And I'm a person who goes to bed at 9:30 or 10. Or so I'm like, gotta cut it off, guys. Gotta cut it off.
Yeah.
And so that happens. Now, is it a problem for that party because they have to play with me? Yeah, it's something that has to be accommodated for, or I have to be okay with my player dying at any point. Be like, hey, you guys can play my character. If my character dies, I understand.
That kind of just makes me think of what we spoke about earlier, just the communication, with everyone playing, just like, setting those boundaries and what we're going to do just makes everything smoother.
Pretty sure we just gave Brant, in our last campaign, Brant just ended up having like a ever-going like concussion.
So many concussions.
And eventually, because I got tired of making other players have to carry him around, he eventually just developed the ability to basically his body just would move on its own in response to the others. So he'd be like unconscious, but like... for some weird monk bullshit reason we came up with, it basically would just follow behind and all like a marionette.
The adaptability is my favorite part of D&D. I had a friend who was very similar, who would just cut out or like fall asleep in the middle of us playing. And like
I have done that.
we'd look
I'll
at this
admit it.
was during COVID, so like, and he lived on the East Coast, so we're all playing on West Coast time,
Yeah.
and it's like 9:30 for us. We're like, we're juiced, like we're going. We've still got 3 more hours, and he's out. Like we can hear him snoring, and we're like, all right. So, and we had to develop a way for his hibernation to be played in there. So you're like, all right, this is going to happen every single session. So how do we make this a thing? And so he would hibernate, but we'd have a wheelbarrow, and so we would just carry him around in a wheelbarrow when he fell asleep.
That's awesome.
That's great. Yeah, so I think that brings us to the end. I thought that was a great podcast today. It's tough being vulnerable and saying what your problem is, because it's so easy to think that you are the greatest player or you're the greatest DM and you don't have issues, or your issues are minor compared to the rest of your parties.
But I am the greatest player and DM.
That was Kyle. We know that Rick doesn't do voices. Okay, so that narrows it down to 3.
I don't need a voice. Too much humility is never a problem.
So anyway,
Neither is modesty. So
so today's motto is remember that you are the problem and to get over yourself.
Yeah.
This has been Tabletop Talk. I'm your host, Jeremy.
And Kyle.
And our guests signing off are...
Trevin and Rick.
See you later, guys.
Almost waved again. It is a compulsion that I have.